People keep telling me I should write this down before I retire, so here it is. I'm not a writer. I'm gonna tell it the way I'd tell it at a shift change in the order it happened. And I'm gonna try not to leave anything out. My name doesn't matter much, but I'll give you the parts that do. I've driven an ambulance in Aroostook County going on 19 years. Before that, I did 2 years down in Bangor, which is where I got my EMT basic and later my intermediate, but I never wanted the city. I grew up in a town of 400 people, where the plow came through twice a day in winter, and the nearest hospital was 50 minutes on a good road. When a spot opened up back home with the county service, I took it, and I never left. I want to be clear about something before I start. I don't believe in ghosts. I've been in the back of a rig with a lot of people while they died, and I have never once seen anything leave them. I've never smelled sulfur or heard a voice or felt a cold spot. I think when people tell those stories, they're usually telling you about their own fear, not about the dead. So when I tell you what happened on Route 11 over the last 9 winters, I need you to understand that I fought against believing it the whole way, and I'm still fighting it. That's kind of the point. Let me start with an ordinary night, because you have to understand how ordinary all of this is before it stops being ordinary. The service I work for covers a big chunk of the county. On paper, it looks like a lot of ground, but most of it is trees. We run out of 2 stations. The main one is attached to the town garage, and the second one is a converted volunteer fire bay about 22 miles north that we call the North Barn, because that's what it used to be. We've got 2 full ambulances, a spare that we call the parade truck, because it only comes out when something's broken, and a first response pickup with a plow on it. Half our crew is career and half is volunteer. In the winter, the volunteers are worth their weight in gold because they know the roads better than the state maps do. My usual partner those years was a guy named Denny Pelletier. Denny was a paramedic. I'm an EMT intermediate. So on paper, he outranked me in the back of the truck. But I had more time driving and more time in the county, so it evened out. Denny was 51, built like a wood stove, and he had opinions about everything. Coffee, tire brands, the governor, the right way to backboard somebody. He'd been an army medic in the 90s, and he never raised his voice, not once, not even the night we lost a kid to a snowmobile wreck out on Long Lake. He just got quieter. That was how you knew with Denny. The start of a shift is always the same, and I mean always. You come in, you sign the log, you take report from the crew going off, then you check the truck. We call it the rig check, and it is not optional. You go through the whole vehicle, top to bottom. You check the oxygen, both the onboard tank and the portable D cylinders, and you write down the pressures. A full D cylinder reads about 2,000 PSY. And if it's under about 500, you swap it, because there is nothing worse than running out of oxygen 20 minutes from the hospital with a patient who needs it. You check the cardiac monitor, the life pack, make sure it powers up, make sure the battery's charged and the spare battery's charged. Run a test strip so you know the printer works. You check the suction unit, you check the drug box against the seal number, and the narcotics against the count in the log. 2 people, both signatures. You check the airway bag, the trauma bag, the OB kit that we almost never open and are always grateful to have. You check the stretcher, the hydraulics, the straps, the locking mechanism that holds it to the floor of the truck, because a stretcher that isn't locked in is a 200-pound projectile in a crash. Then the vehicle itself. Fuel, we keep it above 3/4 in winter, always, and we log it. Fluids, lights, siren, the 4-wheel drive. Tires, which in our county means studded snow tires from October to April, and a set of chains in the compartment behind the passenger seat. that we'll throw on if it gets truly bad. You walk around the truck and you look at it. Denny taught me that. Not just the checklist, but actually looking. He said a truck will tell you if something's wrong before a gauge does, if you pay attention. That night I'm talking about, the first night now, the one that started all of it, which was the second week of January 9 years ago. That night was a bad weather night, but not a remarkable one. We'd had a warning up since noon. The National Weather Service out of Caribou had a winter storm warning posted, 8 to 14 inches. Winds gusting to 30. Blowing and drifting snow. Visibility down to a quarter mile at times. That's a Tuesday up here. We didn't think anything of it. The plows were out. The DOT had pre-treated the main routes, and we figured we'd get the usual. A couple of slide-offs, maybe a chest pain, maybe an old-timer who fell shoveling when the doctor told him not to. We took report at 6. The off-going crew, Sandra and a volunteer named Kyle, had a quiet day. One transfer down to the regional hospital and back, nothing else. Sandra told me the heater in rig 2 was cycling weird and to keep an eye on it. I checked it. It was fine. I checked everything, wrote it all down, signed the sheet. The clock on the wall said 6:24 when I put my initials on the rig check log. I remember that because I remember all of it now, every time, in more detail than I want. Denny made coffee. We sat in the crew room and watched the snow start to come down sideways under the parking lot light. He told me about a boat he was thinking of buying that he had no business buying, and we waited for the radio to do what it always does. The first call came in at 7:52. I know that because I've gone back and looked at the run sheet 100 times. Dispatch County Dispatch is out of the sheriff's office, and that night it was a dispatcher named Louise Sear working the console. A woman who'd been talking crews through the worst nights of their lives for 30 years. Dispatch toned us out for a fall with a possible hip fracture. An 81-year-old woman named Mrs. Thibodeau, out on the station road, had gotten up in the night and gone down in her kitchen and couldn't get up. And her life alert pendant had done its job. We rolled. That's the thing people don't understand about this job. Most of it is driving. You spend far more time behind the wheel than you ever spend doing medicine. And in the winter, driving is the medicine, because a patient does you no good if you put the truck in a ditch on the way to them. I drove. Denny navigated and got on the radio and pulled up what we had on Mrs. Thibodeau, which was a lot because we'd been to her place before. The roads were already bad, not the worst I'd seen, but bad, and the snow was coming down heavy, and the wind was pushing it across the open stretches so that you'd have a clear patch, and then a wall of white, then clear, then white. We call those ground blizzards, where the snow on the ground picks up and moves, even when it's barely falling from the sky. Your headlights don't help you in a whiteout. They actually hurt, because the light bounces off the snow and comes back at you. So you learn to look at the edge of the road, at the reflective markers on the guardrails and the little green mile markers and the tracks of the last vehicle through, and you steer by those. I had the wipers going and the defrost roaring, and I kept us at about 35, which felt like a crawl and was still probably too fast. We got to Mrs. Thibodeau's. Her son had made it there before us and had the porch light on and the door open, which helps more than people know. She was on the kitchen floor, awake, embarrassed, cold, but not dangerously so. Her right leg was shortened and rotated outward, which is the classic look of a hip fracture, and she winced when we so much as touched the blanket near it. Denny got a line in her, gave her a little something for the pain per our protocols, and we packaged her carefully in a scoop stretcher, padding straps, and got her out to the truck. That's its own procedure in the snow. You don't rush a stretcher over ice. 2 people, slow, communicate every step. And the person walking backward calls the obstacles. We loaded her, locked the stretcher into the floor mount, and I heard it click, because I always listen for the click. Then the drive to the hospital, which is the part that matters for this story. The county hospital is a small one, 25 beds, a 4-bay emergency department, and it sits at the south end of our coverage area. To get there from Mrs. Thibodeau's, you have two choices. You can go the long way around on the state highway, which is longer in miles but usually plowed and salted, or you can cut down Route 11 through the Notch, which is shorter but climbs up over a pass and drops back down and has long stretches with nothing on either side but trees and the occasional logging road going off into the dark. Everybody local calls it the Notch, even though on the maps it's just Route 11. In the summer, it's a beautiful drive. In a storm, it's a decision you have to make. That night, I made the decision I almost always made back then. I took the Notch. It was shorter, and Mrs. Thibodeau was stable, but hurting, and every minute counts even when it doesn't, if that makes sense. You want them off your truck and into a warm, bright room where somebody smarter than you can take over. So I took the Notch. The drive up to the pass that night was slow and uneventful. Denny stayed in the back with Mrs. Thibodeau, watching her vitals on the monitor, keeping her talking. I could hear her telling him about her grandkids over the sound of the diesel and the wind. The reflective markers came out of the dark one after another, little green and white eyes catching the headlights, and I steered from one to the next. There was one plow ahead of us somewhere. I could see the fresh scrape of its blade and the sand it had thrown down, and I was grateful for it. We topped the pass and started down the other side, and the snow eased up for a minute, the way it does sometimes on the lee side of a hill, and I could see maybe 100 yards, and the road was empty and white and quiet. We made the hospital at 8:41. I remember thinking it was a good run given the roads. We offloaded Mrs. Thibodeau, wheeled her into the ED, gave our report to the charge nurse, a woman named Peg, who has worked that department longer than I've been alive, it feels like, and who has never once been rattled by anything. Denny gave the handoff. Mechanism findings, what we'd given her and when, her vitals trend. Peg wrote it down, asked 2 questions, and took over. That's the handoff. That's the moment your patient stops being yours. It's a relief every single time. We cleaned the truck, restocked what we'd used, and I redid the parts of the rig check that mattered. New line, new backboard straps repacked, wiped down the bench and the floor. Denny finished the patient care report on the laptop, the PCR, we call it, and it is the single most important piece of paper in this whole job. Because if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. That's the first rule they teach you. Not documented didn't happen. Denny used to say it like a prayer. He typed with 2 fingers and complained the whole time, and he never, ever cut a corner on a report. We cleared the hospital and told dispatch we were available. Louise came back on and told us to post at the north barn because the storm was tracking north and she wanted us closer to the county line. So we drove up and we posted, and we had 2 more calls that night that were as ordinary as they come. A man with chest pain that turned out to be his gallbladder, a car in the ditch on the county road with nobody hurt, just cold and scared. And we sat with them until the tow came. The tow driver that night was a kid named Ricky Susi, who I'd known since he was in diapers, and he winched the car out, and we all stood in the headlights in the blowing snow and talked about the storm for a minute before we all went back to work. That was the shift. 14 hours 3 transports, 1 refusal, 1 assist. I drove 110 miles, most of it in the snow, and I logged every one of them. When the day crew came in at 6 the next morning, I gave report and I went home and I slept. It was in every way that mattered a completely normal night. I'm telling you all of that in detail for a reason. I want you to see how the machine works. Because the horror of this, and I've had 9 years to think about what to call it, the horror isn't that the machine broke, it's that the machine kept working perfectly and something got inside it anyway and used it, and I can't find the place where it got in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Nothing happened that first night. I want to be honest about that. The first night, the woman wasn't there. Or if she was, I didn't see her. It was the second storm that winter, 3 weeks later, when I saw her for the first time. That night, we had a real one. The Weather Service had a blizzard warning up, not just a storm warning, which up here means they expect sustained winds over 35 and visibility under a quarter mile for 3 hours or more. We'd already had 18 inches on the ground from the week before, and now they were calling for another foot on top of it with wind. The DOT had all their trucks out and they were still losing. When the DOT starts losing, you know it's bad because those guys do not quit. We got toned out around 9 for a diabetic call up past the North Barn. A man whose sugar had crashed, and that one went fine. Denny got an amp of dextrose in him, and he came around and refused transport, which is common with diabetics once they're fixed. We cleared and started back south because the dispatch wanted us central again, and that put us on Route 11 headed up toward the pass and the worst of it. I want to describe the driving because it matters. In a real whiteout, you lose the whole world. The hood of the truck disappears. The wipers can't keep up, and the snow comes at the windshield and the headlights. Like you're flying into static. Like the middle of a television tuned to nothing. And your eyes want to follow the flakes, and you have to fight that. You have to make yourself look through it, look for the markers, look for the black line where the plowed edge meets the bank. I had us down to 25. Denny was up front with me now, both of us leaning forward, and neither of us was talking because you don't talk in that, you just drive. We were maybe a mile below the pass on the long, straight stretch that runs past the old Dubois farm when Denny said, "Somebody's out." I saw her a half second later. There was a figure on the right shoulder, in the road really, standing at the edge of the plowed lane where a car would pull off, if a car could pull off in that. A woman. She had a flashlight and she was doing the thing everybody does, the thing that is wired into all of us. She had it up over her head and she was waving it side to side, big slow arcs, flagging us down, the universal "I need help." My first thought was completely ordinary. My first thought was slide off. Somebody went off the road in the storm and here's the driver out trying to wave down help. That happens. That's a Tuesday. I let off the accelerator and I started braking early and gentle, way early, because you do not stand on the brakes on that road in those conditions unless you want to be the second car in the ditch. We came to a stop maybe 40 feet from her, angled a little, so the headlights were on her, and so anybody coming up behind would see our emergency lights, which Denny had already switched on. And I got my first good look at her. She was maybe 40, 45. Hard to tell in that light and that weather. She had on a long wool coat, dark green, the kind of coat that was probably expensive 20 years ago with a hood, but the hood was down and she had a scarf, but it was loose around her neck, not up over her face, the way anybody sane would have it in that wind. Her hair was dark, and it was wet with snow and stuck to the side of her face. No hat. She had the flashlight in her right hand, one of those big black metal ones. And she stopped waving at once. We stopped, and she just stood there with it hanging at her side, looking at the truck. And here's the first thing that I didn't think about at the time and that I've thought about every day since. She wasn't cold. I mean, she wasn't acting cold. When you're out in a blizzard flagging down help, you're hunched, you're stamping your feet, you've got your shoulders up around your ears, your hands are jammed in your armpits when you're not waving. She was just standing there, straight, still, like she was waiting for a bus on a spring afternoon. Denny rolled his window down a crack, and I heard him say, "You okay? What have you got?" The way you do, you lead with the assessment. And she said, and I heard this clear as anything, over the wind, which should have been impossible now that I think about it. But I heard it, she said. "He's still in the car. Please, he won't wake up." And she pointed with the flashlight down the embankment on the right side, off the shoulder, down toward the tree line, where a car would go if it left the road there. That's all it took. That's the thing about this job. You don't stand around asking questions when somebody says there's a person who won't wake up. Denny was out of the truck before I had the parking brake set. I called it in, I keyed the radio, and I told Louise we had a possible MVA with a second party, a slide-off on Route 11 about a mile south of the pass, one unresponsive per bystander, and we were investigating. She came back and acknowledged and said she'd start a second unit and notify the state police. All normal. All by the book. I grabbed the trauma bag and a flashlight of my own, and I went to where the woman had pointed. And Denny was already down at the edge of the shoulder, sweeping his light down the bank. And he looked back up at me and he said, "There's nothing here." And there wasn't. No car. No tracks going off the road. No broken guardrail. No scraped snowbank. Nothing. Just fresh snow. Smooth. Unbroken. Going down the embankment to the trees. In a storm like that, tracks fill in fast. I'll grant you that. But not that fast. Not smooth and unbroken fast. If a car had gone off there in the last hour, there'd be something. A gouge in the bank. A dark shape down in the trees. Something. I turned around to ask the woman where exactly to get her to point again. She was gone. Now I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the kind of thing where your memory lies to you afterward and makes it spookier than it was. So let me tell you what I actually knew that night versus what I've come to know since. That night I told myself a completely reasonable story, and I believed it, and I want you to hear the reasonable story first. The reasonable story is this. It was a whiteout. Visibility was down to almost nothing. A gust came through, and they did come through. Walls of white that took the whole world away for 3 or 4 seconds at a time. And in one of those gusts, she walked off. Maybe she was confused, hypothermic, not thinking straight. Maybe her car really had gone off somewhere, and we were in the wrong spot. People in the cold do strange things. I've seen hypothermic people take their clothes off because their body tells them they're burning up. So I told myself she wandered off in the gust, and we needed to find her before she froze. We searched. We searched hard. Denny and I both with lights, calling out for a good 20 minutes. Up and down that stretch of shoulder, down the bank, back up. The second unit arrived. That was Sandra and Kyle again, and a state trooper made it out too. A young guy named Trooper Vasquez, who I didn't know well then, but know very well now, and even a DOT plow stopped, and the operator got out to help. A big quiet guy named Al Bouchard, who's plowed that road for 25 years. 5 of us, 6, out there in the storm, looking for a woman in a green coat. We found nothing. No woman, no car, no footprints, and this is the part that even that night bothered me. Though I made myself not think about it too hard. No footprints except ours. in fresh snow. She'd been standing there. She'd waved a flashlight over her head. She'd pointed. And there were no prints where she'd stood except the churned up mess we'd made searching. Again, the reasonable story. The wind. The wind was filling in our own prints. Within a minute or two out on the open stretch, I could watch it happen. So maybe hers filled in too. Maybe. That's what I told myself. Trooper Vasquez took a report. That's important, remember that, because it comes back later. He stood in the back of our rig out of the wind, and he wrote it all down in his notebook and then into his laptop, and he read it back to me. Reporting party flagged down County EMS, stated a male subject was unresponsive in a vehicle off the roadway, no vehicle located, reporting party not located, area searched with negative results. He gave it a case number. He gave me the case number and I wrote it on our run sheet. We had a case number. There was paper. The system worked. Denny wrote our PCR when we got back to the barn, except it wasn't really a patient care report because we never had a patient. So it went in as a call with no patient contact, no transport, canceled/unfounded. He documented the whole thing, the bystander, the search, the trooper's case number, the negative results. Not documented, didn't happen. So Denny documented it. It happened. There was a record. I went home that morning and I told my wife about the strange call, the woman who disappeared, and she said the same thing I'd been telling myself. Poor thing was probably confused and half frozen and wandered off. I hope somebody found her. And for about 3 weeks, that's where it sat in my head. A sad, strange, unexplained call. We get those. Not many, but we get them. What changed everything was the next storm. It came in late February. Another big one, another blizzard warning. The kind of storm where the schools close a day ahead and the whole county hunkers down. Different partner that night. Actually, Denny had the flu. So I was working with a per diem paramedic named Gary, who normally ran down in Bangor and picked up shifts with us when he could. Good medic didn't know our roads. We caught a call around 11, a genuine one, a woman in labor out on one of the lake roads whose husband had decided at the last minute that they weren't going to make it to the hospital on their own, which was the right call. We got her, and she was moving along faster than anybody wanted, and I made the decision to run her down Route 11 through the notch because it was the fastest way to the hospital, and because a woman about to deliver in the back of my truck is exactly the situation where I want the shortest possible drive. And I want you to understand, I had not connected anything yet. The disappearing woman from 3 weeks before was filed in my head under weird calls, not under pattern. It never occurred to me going up that road that anything would happen. I was thinking about the patient. I was thinking about whether Gary had the OB kit open and ready, which he did. We came up the long straight past the Dubois farm, and there she was. Same spot. I mean the same spot, within 20 or 30 feet. Green wool coat, no hat, dark hair wet against her face. Flashlight in her right hand, up over her head, waving those same slow arcs. Standing straight and still and not cold. I'll be honest, my stomach dropped. But even then, even with all of it lined up right in front of me, my professional brain did what it's trained to do, which is look for the ordinary explanation. And the ordinary explanation was right there. And it was almost worse than no explanation. I thought it's a person who lives out here and she comes out to the road when she sees emergency lights because she's confused, or because something happened to her once and she's stuck reliving it, or because she's not well. There are people like that. Every rural service has one or two people you get called about or who call you again and again, and there's nothing medically wrong that you can fix. but I had a woman in active labor in the back of my truck. I could not stop. That is not a judgment call. That is protocol, and it is common sense. You do not stop an ambulance that is transporting a time-critical patient to investigate a bystander on the side of the road when a second unit can be sent. So I got on the radio, and I told Louise was on again. That night I told her we had a pedestrian flagging on Route 11 south of the pass, same location as the unfounded call last month, that we could not stop because we were transporting emergent, and to send another unit to check on her. And here is the first crack. This is the first moment where the reasonable world started to come apart, and it did it so quietly that I almost missed it. Louise came back and said, "Copy, but be advised, I've got no other call in that area and no prior on that location. Say again the reference." And I said, "The unfounded MVA last month, the woman flagging, Trooper Vasquez, took a report. There's a case number." And Louise, who does not make mistakes, who has a memory like a filing cabinet, Louise said, "I don't have that, but I'll send someone to check." Not rude, just factual. She had no record of it. And I let it go because I had a baby coming. We made the hospital. The baby, in fact, waited, which they sometimes do. Mom delivered in a nice warm room 40 minutes later with a doctor instead of on my bench, which is the best outcome. Good night in the ledger. And in the churn of all that, I almost forgot about the woman again. Except that when we cleared, I asked dispatch if the other unit had made contact with the pedestrian on Route 11. And Louise said the other unit, that was Sandra again, had driven the whole stretch twice from the Dubois farm to the top of the pass and back and found nobody. No pedestrian, no tracks, nothing. And then Louise said the thing that I went home and could not stop hearing. She said, kinda quiet, off her usual professional register, "You're the second crew to call that in this winter, you know that? Different spot each time, but same story. Woman with a flashlight. I keep telling everybody there's nothing there." That's when it stopped being a weird call and started being a thing I couldn't put down. I want to explain what kind of person I am, so you understand why I did what I did next. I am not a man who chases mysteries. I do crossword puzzles because they end. I like this job partly because it has a shape. You get the call and you do the thing, you write it down, it's over. I don't lie awake. My wife will tell you I'm about as haunted as a fence post. So when I tell you that after that night I started digging, I need you to understand it was against my own nature and that I kept expecting every single step to find the boring answer that would let me stop. I never found it. That's the whole story, really. I went looking for the boring answer for the better part of 2 years, and every road I went down got stranger and quieter instead of clearer. I started with the paper because paper is what I trust. I went to Denny first when he was back from the flu, and I asked him, did we file a PCR on that call in January, the woman who disappeared? And Denny said, of course we did. He remembered writing it. He remembered the trooper's case number. So we pulled it up in the system. Our reporting software keeps everything it has to for billing and for legal. We searched by date, by unit, by the road name. It wasn't there. Not deleted. There's an audit trail if something's deleted, and there was no audit trail. It simply was not there. The calls on either side of it that night were there. The diabetic in the ditch, time-stamped, complete. Between them where a canceled call should have sat, there was nothing. Not a blank record. No record. Like the shift just skipped a beat, nobody noticed but us. Denny stared at that screen for a long time. He's not a spooky guy either. He said somebody must have entered it wrong date, wrong unit, fat-fingered it. So we searched every which way. Whole month, whole winter, both units, every crew. The call was not in the system. I called Trooper Vasquez next. I still had the case number written on my old run sheet because I keep my run sheets. I've kept everyone for 19 years. They're in banker's boxes in my garage. I read him the number over the phone. There was a long pause and he said that number didn't come back to anything. Or he corrected himself, it came back to a case, but not that one. It came back to a report he'd taken 2 years earlier, a stolen snowmobile. Closed. He remembered the night I was talking about. He remembered standing in the back of my rig out of the wind. He remembered writing it up. But the report he remembered writing did not exist. And the number he remembered assigning belonged to a snowmobile. He got quiet the same way Louise had. And then he told me something he said he'd never put in a report because there was nothing to put. He said in his 11 years on that stretch, he'd personally taken 3 or 4 flag down calls that went nowhere, always in heavy snow, always a woman. And that the old trooper who trained him, a guy long retired named Sergeant Levasseur, had told him on his very first winter, if you get flagged down on the notch in a whiteout and there's no car, you note it, you search it, and you don't lose sleep over it because it's older than you are and it's never once been anything you could help. That's the first time somebody used the word older. It stuck in me. So I went to find Sergeant Levasseur. He wasn't hard to find. Retired troopers up here don't go far. He was living out past the fish hatchery in a little house he'd built himself. 80-some years old, sharp as a tack, hands shaking a little but nothing else. He made me instant coffee, and we sat at his kitchen table, and I told him why I'd come. And I watched his face while I talked, and his face didn't do the thing I expected. It didn't get amused, it didn't get worried about me. It got tired. Like I'd brought him a bill he'd been expecting for a long time. He asked me 2 questions before I'd even finished. He asked, green coat? And I said yes. And he asked, she tell you he won't wake up? And I said yes. Those exact words. And he nodded slow and looked out the window at the snow on his woodpile for a while. Then he told me what he knew, which wasn't a story so much as a list, because he was a cop, and cops give you lists. He'd worked that road from the mid-60s to the late 90s. In that time, he'd been flagged down on the notch in snowstorms more times than he'd bothered to count. Always the same. Always nothing there. He said in the early years, he tore that embankment apart looking, brought in dogs once, brought in a dive team to the pond below the pass another time because he was sure, he was certain, there was a car in it. There wasn't. He said by the end he did what he told Vasquez to do. Note it, search it, let it go. But here's what he'd done that nobody else had thought to do, because he was that kind of man. He'd gone looking for where it started. And he told me that the oldest account he ever personally ran down, he'd talked to an old timer in the 70s who was old, then went back to a specific winter, the winter of 1952. He said before that, nothing. After that, every bad blizzard, somebody sees her. So I asked the obvious question. I asked what happened on the notch in 1952. And he said, that's the thing. Nothing happened on the notch in 1952. That's not where it happened. He explained it to me, and I want to get this right. The road I drive, Route 11 over the pass, the modern road, was built in 1953. State highway project, straightened and graded and paved the following summer. Before that, the way over that pass was a different road. An older road, a narrow dirt road that the county maintained badly, that ran a little to the east of where the highway runs now, closer to the pond, over an old bridge. When they built the new road, they abandoned the old one. It's still there, technically. It's a logging road now, gated, grown in, the bridge long gone. On the maps, it doesn't even have a name anymore. It's just a dashed line. And in the winter of 1952, on that old road in a blizzard, a car went off the bridge into the pond. Levasseur had pulled the county records himself, decades ago, out of the same curiosity that had now landed in me. A man and a woman. The man was driving. They went through the rail on the old bridge in a whiteout and into the water. The man got out. The woman didn't. He walked in the storm back toward town to get help, and by the time anyone got back out there with him, it was full dark and blowing 40, and they couldn't even find the bridge, let alone the car. They pulled her out in the spring when the ice went. The report, Levasseur said, listed the cause as weather. Just that. Weather. And then he told me the part that I have not been able to put down since. The part that changed the shape of the whole thing in my head. He said the woman didn't die in the crash. The county coroner's notes, and this was 1952. So it's a paragraph, not a file. Said she'd survived the impact. She'd gotten into the back seat, up out of the water that was filling the front, and she'd waited. There were marks. She'd been alive down there in the cold and the dark, in an air pocket, for some amount of time. Nobody could ever know, waiting for the man to come back with help. He never came back, not because he didn't try, because the road he walked to get help the way to town was about to be erased. Within a year, there was a new road half a mile west, and the old road, the bridge, the whole path he'd run down screaming for somebody to come, just quietly stopped existing, got gated off, grew in, came off the maps. Levasseur looked at me across that table and he said the thing that I think is the truest thing anybody has said to me about any of this. He said, "She's not flagging down the wrong car, she's flagging down the wrong road. She's still out there waiting for somebody to come the way he went. And every year, the way he went is a little more gone. So she comes to the new road, to us, because we're the closest thing left to help." I drove home from Levasseur's in the dark, and I'll tell you I had to pull over twice, and I don't pull over. Here's what a reasonable man does with a story like that. A reasonable man says, okay, that's a sad old local legend, and Levasseur is an old man, and old men in this county collect these stories like they collect rusted machinery in the yard. A reasonable man does not build his life around a 1952 coroner's paragraph. So I told myself I'd check it the way you check anything, and that when it fell apart, because these things always fall apart when you actually check them, I'd be able to sleep again. I checked it. It didn't fall apart. That was the problem. Every single piece I could verify, I verified. The road. That was easy. I went to the county road commissioner's office, a woman named Brenda who has run that office for 30 years and knows where every culvert in the county is buried. I asked her about the old alignment of Route 11 over the pass. She didn't even have to look it up. She pulled a plat book off the shelf, one of the big cloth-bound ones, and she opened it to the pass. And there it was, the current highway, and running beside it in dashed lines, the old county road, and crossing the outlet of the pond, a little double line marked bridge for bridge with a date, and stamped across the old alignment in faded red, abandoned, and a date in 1953. Just like Levasseur said. She let me photocopy it. I still have the copy. I've looked at it so many times, the toner's wearing off. The crash. That took longer. County accident records from 1952 aren't computerized, obviously. They're in a storage room in the basement of the courthouse in boxes, and half of them are water damaged. But the clerk let me look, and I spent 3 Saturdays down there, and I found it. Not much. A single page. 2 names I'm not going to write their names here, because it doesn't feel right, and because their people might still be around. A date in February 1952. Location given as the Pond Bridge, Old Town Road. Cause, weather. And a second page, the coroner's, and it said what Levasseur said it said. Survived the impact. Moved to the rear of the vehicle. Cause of death, exposure and drowning, manner accidental, and a date of recovery. April, 2 months later. When the ice went out, the weather. This is the one that I think finally broke something loose in me, because weather is the most boring, most reliable data there is. The National Weather Service and NOAA keep climate records going back over a century, and you can pull them. Anybody can. They're public. I pulled the daily records for that February in 1952 for the nearest station. And there it was. A major winter storm. The kind that makes the record books, heavy snow and high wind, the night of the crash, a blizzard, and then, because I'm the kind of person who once I start can't stop, I did something that I wish I hadn't done, because it's the thing I can't explain to anybody without sounding insane. I took my own run sheets, I told you I keep them all, and I went through 19 years of them, and I marked every single time I'd been flagged down on the notch by the woman in the green coat, or heard secondhand of another crew who had. And then I pulled the NWS storm records for each of those dates. Every one was a blizzard, not a snowstorm. A blizzard by the actual definition: sustained wind, visibility a quarter mile or less, 3 hours or more. She never came on an ordinary snowy night, only on the nights that matched, only on the nights that were, as near as the weather can be, the same night as 1952. She wasn't appearing in the snow. She was appearing in that storm. The same storm, over and over. I want to tell you about the other crews now, because this is where it stops being my private, strange thing and starts being something wrong with the whole world. And it's also the part that, act by act, made me doubt my own memory, which turned out to be the actual horror, not her, but that. Because here's the thing. I started asking around. Careful, the way you ask about something, you don't want to be the crazy one for asking about. And a lot of people had a piece of it. But nobody had the same piece. Sandra, my coworker, had seen her twice. But Sandra swore up and down the coat was gray, not green, and that the woman had a hat, a knit hat, pulled down, and that she never spoke. She just pointed. Sandra was as sure of that as I was sure of mine. Gray coat, hat, silent. I said green, no hat, and she talked. We'd both seen the same woman on the same road, and we could not have described 2 more different people, and neither of us was willing to budge, because you don't budge on what you saw with your own eyes. Kyle, the volunteer, said the woman had been standing next to a car. He was certain. He said there was a car, an old dark sedan, half in the ditch, with its dome light on, and that when he looked back it was gone. Neither Denny nor I ever saw a car, ever. Just her. Al Bouchard, the plow driver, the quiet one. I bought him a coffee at the gas station one morning after his shift and asked him straight out. He plows that road 40, 50 times a winter. He said he'd seen her more than anybody, probably. And he said something none of the rest of us said. He said she doesn't wave him down. When it's the plow, he said she just stands there and watches him go by, and she turns her head to follow the truck. And his words, she looks disappointed. He said she knows a plow can't help. He said she only flags the ones that can carry somebody out. And Denny saw exactly what I saw. Green coat, no hat, and he won't wake up. Word for word the same as me, which comforted me for about a day, until I realized the obvious thing, which is that Denny and I were always in the same truck. We saw the same version because we were together. Everybody who rode alone or with somebody else saw a different woman. That's the detail that I couldn't make fit any theory. If she's a real living confused person, she can't be wearing a green coat and a gray coat at the same time. If she's a memory, a hallucination, something my own tired brain builds out of blowing snow at 2 a.m, then how did Denny build the exact same one, down to the words? And why does everyone else build a different one, but always a woman, always a coat, always a light, always the same road, always a blizzard? It was like we were each getting shown the same event through our own eyes, and the event was bending itself to fit whoever was watching. Sandra needed her silence, so she was silent. Kyle needed the car to make it make sense, so there was a car. I needed her to speak, and she spoke to me. Al, who couldn't help, got nothing but a look. I checked the cameras too, because of course I did. There aren't many out there. It's not the kind of place with cameras on every pole, but the DOT has a couple of road weather stations on Route 11, the RWIS cameras that snap still every few minutes for the plow dispatchers to check conditions, and there's one about a half-mile below the pass. I filed the request, waited weeks, and got back a folder of images from 3 of the storm nights I'd flagged. I went through every frame. You already know what I'm going to say. She's not in them, not once. And I told myself that was the boring answer, finally arriving: no woman on the camera. Therefore, no woman. Therefore, tired eyes and a local legend and an overworked imagination. Except the camera faces the exact stretch where I stopped for her. And in the frames from the night Denny and I both saw her, the ones time-stamped to the minute I called it in, you can see my ambulance. You can see it stopped on the shoulder, lights on right where I stopped it. You can see 2 sets of boot prints in the snow, mine and Denny's, going down toward the bank. The camera caught all of that. It caught everything that was really there. It just didn't catch her. And there were no prints but ours. The camera agreed with the snow, and the snow agreed with the camera. And both of them called me a liar. And Denny too. That's the point where I stopped being able to tell myself the reasonable story, because the reasonable story needs the camera to show nothing at all. Empty road, no ambulance. Proof. I imagined the whole stop. Instead, the camera showed the stop was real and the woman wasn't. Both at once. And there's no version of tired and imagining things that stops the truck, walks 2 men down the bank, and leaves their boot prints for the camera while erasing only her. Something was editing what got recorded, keeping the parts with witnesses, removing her every time. For 70 years, I'm gonna slow down now and tell you about the winters after that, because this is where the thing stopped being something that happened to me on the road and started being something that was wrong with the numbers. And I trust numbers more than I trust my own eyes, which is why this part is the part that scares me. After I understood the pattern that she only came in a true blizzard, always on the same stretch, I started keeping my own log. Not the official run sheet. A separate notebook I kept in my locker. Every blizzard I wrote down everything. Odometer at the start of the shift, odometer at the end, fuel at start, fuel at end. Time we left, time we arrived, every leg. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I think I was trying to catch reality being consistent so I could stop being afraid. I wanted a column of numbers that added up. They didn't add up. And the way they didn't add up is the thing I most need you to understand, because it's so small and so specific that nobody will ever believe it. And it's the truest thing I know. Here's the first one. A blizzard. 2 winters after the labor call, we ran a patient down the notch, a real patient, a heart attack. A man from one of the fishing camps on the lake, a genuine emergency. And on that run, we passed her. Same spot, past the Dubois farm, green coat, light up. I couldn't stop, same as with the labor. A real dying man in the back is not a call you interrupt, so we went by her. And here's the number. That stretch of Route 11 from the Dubois farm to the county hospital is 18.4 miles. I have driven it 1,000 times. It is 18.4 miles. That night, my trip odometer, which I had zeroed at the farm out of habit, I zero it at landmarks. That night, the trip odometer read 22.1 when we pulled into the hospital bay. 3.5 extra miles. On a road with no detours. A road with nowhere to detour to. I didn't turn off. There is nowhere to turn off. I drove a straight shot down a plowed highway, and it was 3.5 miles longer than it has ever been before or since in the time. The run should be 22, 23 minutes in bad conditions. That night it was 34 minutes. I know because dispatch timestamps everything. The moment you go en route, the moment you arrive, it's all logged at the county. I can't fudge it, and neither can anybody else. 34 minutes. Denny was in the back doing CPR in relays, and he came up front at one point, and I will never forget this. He leaned into the cab and he said, "Why aren't we there yet?" Not scared, annoyed. Because it felt wrong to him too. The run was taking too long, and there was no reason for it. The patient lived, by the way. I want to say that. We got him there, and they took him up, and he lived. But when I went back a week later and looked at everything, the odometer photo I'd taken, the dispatch times, the map, the numbers said we had driven 22 miles in 34 minutes down an 18-mile road, and both the distance and the time were too big, and they were too big by different amounts, so I couldn't even tell myself we'd just gone slow. We went slow and we went far, on a road that is neither long nor slow. It was like the road that night while she was on it was longer than the road is. Like passing her cost us something. Distance, time. I don't have a word for it. The best I've ever been able to say is, on the night she's out, the notch is bigger on the inside. After that, I started noticing it every blizzard once I knew to look. Not always 3 miles, sometimes a few tenths, but always more. The trip was always a little longer than the map. On a blizzard night, on that road, and never on any other road or any other night. I checked the truck, understand? I had the county mechanic, a guy named Pete, who has forgotten more about diesels than I'll ever know, put my truck on the machine and checked the odometer calibration against the tire size and the GPS. Dead accurate. Pete signed off on it. The truck was telling the truth. The road was lying. Then the patient started remembering her. That's the part where I really began to come apart, if I'm honest. Because up to then, it had been my problem. Mine and Denny's, mine and the crew's. It was a thing that happened to the people who worked the road. But patients don't work the road. Patients are just sick people in the back of my truck who don't know a thing about any of this. The heart attack man, the one from the fishing camp, the one whose run took 34 minutes down an 18-mile road. I went and visited him in rehab a few weeks later, partly to see how he was doing, and partly, I'll admit, because I wanted to ask him something. He was doing great, grateful. We talked about the night, and then without me leading him to it at all, he said, "Hey, who was the lady?" And I said, "What lady?" And he said, "The lady who looked in the back window." He'd been on the stretcher, in and out, Denny working on him, and he said at one point the truck slowed down, and he looked out the little back window, the one in the rear door, and there was a woman looking in at him, standing outside a moving ambulance in a blizzard at his eye level, keeping pace, looking in at him through the glass. Green coat. He remembered the green coat. He said he figured it was the medicine, the fear, his brain doing something, and he'd never told anybody because it sounded crazy. He asked me who she was, like maybe I'd have a normal answer. I told him I didn't know. That was true. I still don't. After that, I couldn't stop hearing it. Not every patient. But over the years, a handful, always from blizzard runs down the notch, always brought it up themselves, always embarrassed, always some version of the same thing. A woman outside the truck, looking in, keeping up with us somehow. A couple of them said she looked like she was trying to see who we had in the back, like she was checking, like she was looking for someone specific and it was never them. And then the hospital. This is the one I have the least idea what to do with, because the hospital is the solid ground of this whole job. You bring them your patient, you give your report, they sign, it's in their system and yours. 2 independent records that have to match, or somebody has to explain why. It is the most documented handoff in the world, and a few times, not many, 3 that I'm sure of, I brought a patient down the notch in a blizzard, handed them off, gave report to a nurse, watched them get wheeled back, went home, and later there was no record on their end, not the patient's. My PCR existed, my dispatch times existed, but the hospital had no arrival logged, no bed assignment, no triage note, and the nurse I gave report to once it was Peg herself, and Peg does not forget, had no memory of the handoff. The patients were real, the patients were fine. I checked, they went home, they existed, they got better. But the 10 minutes where I handed them over that specific slice of the night on the blizzard runs, was gone from the hospital's memory and records, like it had been trimmed out. Same as the trooper's report, same as our first PCR, same as her on the camera. Something goes down that road on those nights, and afterward there are these little missing pieces always around the edges of her, always the exact size and shape of the moment she was closest. I started to understand it like this, and I know how this sounds. It's not that she erases things. It's that she's the missing thing, and being near her makes other things go missing too. The way a hole in the ice isn't cold, it's just where the ice isn't, and everything near the hole is in danger of going through. The last piece, before I tell you about the night everything changed, is the recordings, and this is the one I can least stand to think about. County dispatch records everything. Every radio transmission, every phone line, all of it, time-stamped, archived, kept for years, because it has to be, for liability and for the state. When there's a bad call and incident review, we pull the audio and we sit in a room and we listen to ourselves and we learn. I've done it 100 times. It's a normal part of the job. After the 34-minute run, I asked Louise to pull the dispatch audio for that night because I wanted to hear the timestamps, hear it all laid out. She did. We sat in the little room at the sheriff's office with the good speakers and we listened to the whole run. My voice going en route, Denny in the background calling out a rhythm. Louise's voice, calm, giving me the hospital status. All of it normal, all of it exactly as I remembered. Except for one thing. About 2/3 of the way through the run, right around When the odometer would have been doing whatever it did, there's a stretch of maybe 40 seconds where you can hear another voice on the channel. Under mine. Not stepping on me, not keying over me. Under me, like someone holding a live mic in a quiet room a long way off, and the room has wind in it. A woman's voice, calm, not distressed. And she's saying, and Louise and I played this back more times than was good for either of us. She's saying, he's still in the car. And then a pause, and then, he won't wake up. The same words she said to me the very first night. The exact words. In the same flat, patient tone. Louise went white. Because here's the thing about our radio system, it's trunked and it's logged. And every transmission records which unit or console keyed it, every one. That's automatic. It's how the system works. Those 40 seconds of the woman's voice are on the recording, clear as anything, but they are attributed to no unit, no console, no radio in the county keyed them. The system logged audio that, according to the same system, was never transmitted by anything. Louise had worked that console 30 years. She told me, quiet, that she'd heard it before. 2 or 3 times over the decades, cleaning up audio from bad blizzard nights, she'd caught it, a woman under the traffic saying those words. And every time she'd told herself it was bleed over from another system, skip from some faraway channel, a glitch. She'd never told a soul. She retired the next year. I don't think it was because of that, but I don't think it wasn't either. So that's what I had going into the last winter I'm going to tell you about. Let me lay it out plain. The way I finally had to lay it out for myself. Sitting at my own kitchen table with my notebook, feeling like a crazy person and knowing every line was checkable. A woman died in a car in a pond in a blizzard in 1952. Alive and waiting for help that was walking down a road that was about to be erased. Every blizzard since real blizzards, by the numbers, not just snow, she comes to the new road and flags down whoever can carry a person out. She looks different to everyone, but she's always the same. She's not on any camera. She leaves no tracks. She takes the paperwork with her, the reports and the handoffs and the little slices of the night where she got close. And she folds extra distance and extra time into a road that doesn't have room for it, and her voice is on recordings that were never transmitted, saying the same 2 sentences she's been saying for 70 years. He's still in the car. He won't wake up. I want to be honest that by then I wasn't scared of her exactly. You'd think I would be. But everything she does is the behavior of someone asking for help. That's all it has ever been. It's the most human thing in the world. What scared me, what scares me still, what made me finally understand what this job actually is, was what I figured out on the last night, when I finally did the one thing I'd never done. I stopped. It was last winter. Late January, near the anniversary of that first strange night, though I don't put stock in anniversaries. The storm that came through was the worst I'd seen in years. The Weather Service had a blizzard warning up for 36 hours. They were calling it historic. 2 feet, maybe more. Winds gusting to 50, wind chills 20 below. They shut the interstate down south of us, which they almost never do. The kind of storm where the county tells people to stay off the roads and mostly people listen. And the only things moving are the plows and us. Denny had retired the summer before. He finally bought the boat. So I was working with a younger medic named Marcus. Good kid, 3 years on from away originally from Connecticut, but he'd taken to the county and he was solid. I hadn't told him any of this. You don't. You don't hand a 3-year medic a story about a dead woman on Route 11 in the middle of his shift. I'd made my peace with carrying it alone. We'd been slammed all evening. That's how these storms go. People think they can make it, and they can't. We'd done 2 rollovers and a cardiac, and a man who cut his hand open running a snowblower. He should not have been running. Around 1 a.m, we caught the call that put us on the notch. A woman out past the pass on one of the camp roads, having a stroke. The husband called it in. Said her face had dropped and she couldn't talk right. And that is a load and go. That is the most time-critical thing we do. Because with a stroke, the brain is dying by the minute, and the only thing that helps is getting them to the scanner and the drugs fast. We got to her. She was having a big one, no question. The whole left side gone. We were fast and we were clean, quick assessment. Got her packaged, got a line, called the hospital to activate their stroke team so they'd be ready. And we loaded her, and I heard the stretcher click. And Marcus was in the back with her, and I pointed the truck down the notch because it was, as always, the fastest way. And this time there was no question of the long way. The long way would have killed her. And the storm was so bad that I had us down to 15 miles an hour in places. It was the worst driving of my life. The plows couldn't keep up. The road I was on had 4-5 inches of fresh over glare ice. And the wind was throwing the snow so hard that the headlights were useless, worse than useless. And I was steering by the reflective markers, and half the time I couldn't see those. I had the emergency lights on, and they were just filling the whiteout with red, bouncing back at me off 10 million flakes. And I shut them off because they made it worse, and there was nobody out here anyway. Nobody in the world was out here but us. We came up past the Dubois farm, and she was there. Green coat, no hat, flashlight up those slow arcs, same spot. Standing straight and still in a 50-mile-an-hour wind that was knocking me sideways in a 9,000-pound truck. She wasn't moving, wasn't leaning into it. Her coat wasn't even whipping the way it should. Still as a photograph in the middle of the worst storm in a decade. And I had a stroke patient in the back. Every rule I have, every rule I've followed for 19 years said keep driving. Send another unit. Do not stop. There is a dying woman on your stretcher, and she is real, and she is now. And the woman on the shoulder has been dead for 70 years, and there is nothing you can do for her. I knew all of that. I have never known anything more clearly. I stopped anyway. I can't fully explain why. I've tried. The closest I can come is this. I had spent 9 years learning that she only ever asks for one thing, and that nobody in 70 years had ever given it to her, and that every single winter she comes back out into that storm and tries again. And I was so tired. I was so tired of driving past her. I think some part of me that wasn't thinking like a professional anymore just couldn't do it one more time, so I stopped the truck. And I told Marcus over my shoulder to stay with our patient, monitor her. I'd be 30 seconds. He said, what? Why are we stopping? And I didn't answer him because I didn't have an answer that would make sense. I put it in park. I left it running. And I got out into the storm. The wind hit me like a wall. 20 below with that wind, your face goes numb in seconds, and your eyes water and freeze at the corners. The truck was right there behind me, running, headlights on, and within 10 feet of it, I could barely see it. Just a smear of light and the red glow when I'd forgotten I'd left the parking lights on. That's how bad it was. And I walked toward her, toward where she stood. And the strange thing, the thing I keep coming back to, is that I could see her fine. Everything else was gone. In the white, but she was clear. The way something is clear when you're looking right at it. And everything else is your peripheral vision. I got close. Closer than anyone had described getting. And she looked at me, straight at me, and her eyes were just eyes. Tired and dark and ordinary. A person's eyes. And up close, she wasn't frightening at all. She was just cold and worried and waiting. And she said it again. The words, quiet, right to me, he's still in the car. He won't wake up. And I did the thing. The thing nobody does. Instead of going to look down the embankment for a car that isn't there, I looked at her and I answered her. The way I'd answer any patient, the way you're trained to calm, direct, giving them the truth and the next step. I said, ma'am, I'm going to help him, but I need you to come with me. I've got a warm truck right here, and I need you to get in it. And we'll go get him help together, okay? Come with me to the truck. Because that's the job. When you can't fix the emergency on the spot, you transport. You get them to the place where the help is. I couldn't find her car, I couldn't reach her man. But I could do the one thing I actually know how to do, which is put a cold, frightened person in a warm truck and drive them toward help. It's the most basic thing we do. It's the whole job, really, underneath all the equipment. You go to people in the worst moment of their lives and you don't fix it. Mostly you can't fix it, but you don't leave them alone in it. You bring them with you. For 1 second, I swear this on everything, for 1 second her face changed. Something in it let go, like I'd finally said the right thing. Like in 70 years, I was the first one to understand that she wasn't asking us to find the car. She was asking us to take her with us, to not drive past, to not leave her out there one more time. And then she looked past me, at the truck, at the back of the truck, where the little window is, where my stroke patient was lying with Marcus working over her. And her face changed again, and this time it wasn't relief. It was recognition, like she'd seen something she knew. And she wasn't looking at my patient. I turned to follow her eyes, and I realized she wasn't looking through the back window at all. She was looking at the driver's door, at the empty driver's seat, at my seat. And she got the smallest, saddest look. And she raised her hand, not the flashlight, her other hand, her bare hand. And she reached out, not toward me, past me, toward the cab, toward the wheel, the way you'd reach toward someone you'd been waiting a very long time to see. And I understood the thing that I have not been able to ununderstand since, the thing that is the actual end of this story. Even though the story keeps going every winter, she wasn't waiting for us to save the man in the car. She was waiting for the man in the car. The one who got out, the one who walked down the road to get help and couldn't get back. The driver, that's who she's been flagging down for 70 years, not an ambulance, not a rescuer. She's watching every vehicle that comes over that pass in a storm, looking for the one who left, and a man who drives the road alone in a blizzard, who stops, who gets out, who walks toward her through the snow, saying, I'm going to help him. Come with me for 1 second, to her in the white. That's him. Coming back. Finally coming back. And I was standing there in his place, in the driver's spot, having left my vehicle in a storm to walk toward her, doing the exact thing he did in 1952. And she looked at me with 70 years of waiting in her face. And for 1 second, she thought I was him. And I had to watch the moment she realized I wasn't. Her hand went down, slowly. And she looked at me not angry. That would have been easier. She looked at me with a kind of patience that was so much worse. Because it wasn't the patience of someone who's going to keep waiting. It was the patience of someone who understands that you're not the one, and that's all right. because eventually someone will be, and she has time. She has all the time there is. She's got as much time as the road is long. And the road on those nights is longer than the road is. And then Marcus was yelling from the truck, yelling my name, real fear in it. And I turned, and the moment I took my eyes off her, the whiteout took her, just took her. And I was standing alone in 50-mile-an-hour wind, in the pitch dark, with my own truck, a red smear behind me, and a stroke patient in the back Marcus was screaming, crashing her. Pressure had bottomed out. She was posturing. We were losing her. I ran back. I don't remember the running. I remember being in the driver's seat and my hands were so cold I could barely grip the wheel, and Marcus was in the back doing everything right, everything by the book. And I drove. I drove that stroke patient down the rest of the notch in the worst conditions I have ever driven in. And I did it right. I did the whole thing right, because that is what 19 years is for, so that when your hands don't work and your mind is somewhere it should never have gone, the driving still happens correctly. We made the hospital. The stroke team was waiting. They took her straight to the scanner, and she lived. She was rough for a while, but she lived. She went to rehab. She went home. I checked. I always check. Here are the numbers from that run, and then I'll stop, because after the numbers there isn't anything else to say. From the camp road to the county hospital is 26 miles. That night the trip odometer read 31. Dispatch had us en route at 1:14 and arriving at 2:09. 55 minutes. And I was stopped out of the truck for what I would have sworn under oath was 90 seconds. 2 minutes at the outside. The dispatch log, because the truck pings its location the whole time automatically, I can't touch it. The dispatch log shows the truck stationary at the Dubois farm for 11 minutes. 11 minutes. I was out of that truck in 20 below wind, in shirt sleeves, because I hadn't grabbed my coat, for 11 minutes, and I didn't get frostbite, and my patient didn't die in those 11 minutes, even though she was crashing. And I remember 90 seconds. I don't know where the other 9.5 minutes went. I don't know where they went. They're gone the way the trooper's report is gone, the way our first PCR is gone, the way the handoffs are gone. They went with her. Being near her cost time. And that night I got closer than anyone, and it cost more. I filed my report. I documented all of it. The real parts, the stroke, the transport, the times. I did not document that I stopped or her or any of it, because there is no box on the PCR for what happened. And because I have finally learned the thing Levasseur and Louise and Al all learned before me, which is that you note what you can help and you carry the rest quietly. I wrote it down here instead. This is the only place it's written down. Make of that what you want. I'm still driving. I want you to understand that, because I think people expect a story like this to end with the man quitting. Moving to Florida, never touching snow again. I didn't quit. I've got a year, maybe 2, left before I hang it up on my own terms, and I'm going to finish them out. The job is the job. People still fall down in their kitchens and have heart attacks in fishing camps and go into labor in blizzards, and somebody has to go get them, and I'm good at it, and I'm not going to stop being good at it because of her. But one thing has changed, and it's the thing I can't take back, and it's the reason I finally wrote all this down. I don't take the notch anymore. Not in a storm. I take the long way, the state highway, every time, even when it's slower, even when slower might matter. And I've had to make my peace with what that might cost a patient someday. And I lie a little on the reason when the younger guys ask. I tell them the notch drifts in bad and the long way's safer. That's even true. But it's not why. It's not why. The reason I take the long way is that I know now what I did that night. I answered her. I told her I'd help him, and I told her to come with me, and she almost did. And I'm afraid this is the part I can't get out from under. I'm afraid that one of these storms, if I come over that pass again, and she's standing there, she won't be waiting for the man in the car anymore. She'll be waiting for me, because I'm the one who stopped. I'm the one who came back. I'm the one who told her to get in the truck. And here's the question I never got to ask Levasseur before he passed. The one I'll be carrying the rest of my life. The one I'd like somebody smarter than me to answer. When you tell a patient to come with you, when you get out into the storm, and you promise them you'll take them toward help, and you mean it, does it matter whether you can actually save them? Or does the promise count for something all its own? Because if it does, then somewhere out on that road, on the nights the weather is exactly right, there's a woman in a green coat who's been told, finally, after 70 years, to come with me. And she's going to hold me to it. Drive safe in the snow. If somebody flags you down out there in the real bad stuff, where there's nothing around for miles, I'm not going to tell you not to stop. Stopping is the decent thing, and I'd think less of you if you didn't. I'm just telling you to look before you get out at whether they're cold, at whether the wind is touching them. That's all. That's the only advice I've got after 19 years. Look at whether the wind is touching them, then do what you have to do.